if you need to make a performance fast or you need to build something fast, you need people to, communicate and trust each other.
Get together.
And that's that we kept developing this. And then we went on Meisner Intensive, which we then broke into 3 levels. And the 3rd level, which we did this spring, turned out into absolutely already not Meisner training, but it was already Lasky training. People need well-being so much.
Yeah.
People struggle so much.
Yes.
And there are so many conflicts happening just from people not knowing the emotions and not knowing how to communicate through that.
Yeah. Everything that we are trying to deliver to other students are things that we have lived through individually and collectively. Me with her, me with my kids, her with me, Sveta with our kids. It's all things that we've come to realize in a very pointed way, especially since my accident.
Hey there, this is part 2 of our podcast with Jason and Svetlana Lasky. If you did not listen to the first episode, skip back one to episode 182 and listen to the first part. Otherwise, enjoy.
So we took some of those ideas that were in Murmansk, and then we brought them to Kenya. And then when I got the job teaching at the Nairobi Performing Arts Studio, thank you, Stuart, at the Kenya National Theatre, I took some of those teaching ideas and I started delivering them to the Kenyan students, the theater and TV and film actors there. And then we started coming up with some new ideas. I remember stopping one of the Meisner classes and I just went on a whim and followed my inspiration and just started playing with the way the Meisner repetition was set up. That ended up leading to us. Well, we took that idea. I told Sveta about it, and it just kind of sat for a little while. Fast forward now, we're at the end of our time in Nairobi. I get a job offer to go teach at UWC Dilijan in Armenia. So now we're so then we say, all right, before we pack up, before we go, what else is on the bucket list? Earlier in the story, Sveta had said extreme places, a theater project in the coldest place, and then a theater project on the equator. Well, we haven't done the theater project on the equator yet, but we decided, with a week to go, we have to sell a bunch of stuff. We have to sell a car where we don't even have the proper registration, pack all the house. We're going to send it to Armenia. We should definitely go on a trip. So let's go to the equator.
2 kids and one of them baby who's crying in a car seat constantly.
Yeah, Ruslan who's throwing up on himself and he can't sit still and blah, blah, blah. Let's go to the equator. Okay, let's go do that. So we went to the equator.
That's why you finished your master's degree.
I pressed send for my master's of education at the equator. We hotspotted that stuff and I sent my last, piece of work, my last thesis or literature review, whatever it was I was working on at the equator. We hung out at the equator. We stayed at, and on the way back, we have plenty of time to still pack. Oh yeah, we're leaving in 4 days, no problem. Let's stop.
It was 3 already by then.
It was 3. Yeah, let's go.
Even on Friday.
Let's go hang out in the Princess Elizabeth II suite at this this treehouse hotel with all these like 50 or 55 elephants that show up in the evening to drink from this lake. Let's go do that with the 2 kids. So we stayed in. It was Princess Elizabeth because she was on holiday with her hubby when she found out the news. It was a
gift actually from her parents.
It was
for the wedding.
Yeah.
And the hotel in Kenya.
Yeah.
Some people get some gifts,
Yeah. Some people get a book. She got a suite, right? So we stayed in Princess Elizabeth's place and it was on that trip that she found out that her father passed away and then she became king. But it's marked very clearly Princess Elizabeth's
Queen.
suite. Yeah. So she became queen, right? God rest her soul. Hey, Charles, how you doing? He figures into the story a little bit later too, somehow. We get the job to come to Armenia. So we packed up everything. We took care of the car. We took care of all of our belongings. We said our goodbyes. But still, over the years, we've stayed in touch with a lot of our Nairobi and Kenyan extended family.
We've supported our nannies, 2 girls, to get education. One of them has diploma already and another is getting her now, August.
Yeah.
We are doing every year fundraising for education.
Yeah. Sveta's
those who can't afford.
Sveta, in her entrepreneurial spirit and her philanthropic spirit, She's worked with orphans and orphanages for so many years. She's worked with just like doing a lot of the work that usually I would only read about or hear about or see a documentary about. But then I'm married to somebody who does wonderful things for giving people not only, a roof over their heads and food in their bellies and diapers on the baby's bum bums, but also a lot of hope. And
education.
And education, yeah.
Yay for education.
To create a better life. We got to Armenia. I got offered a job to teach theater and English right over, and 15, 20 minutes from where we're seated right now. That was our introduction to Armenia. And I worked at that school for 3 years. We did a lot of what I felt and what you felt to be good work. I helped
with productions.
She helped with productions. We did the complete Shakespeare that we didn't do in Nairobi, and that was a beautiful production. Lots of fun. Something the school really needed at that time, also because of all the stress of exams. And IB is a beautiful program. We wholeheartedly believe in the pedagogy and the philosophy behind it. In practice, though, we see how many students are struggling. I've seen firsthand, and Sveta's seen firsthand, how much students who aren't prepared for that kind of rigorous academic work, how much they really, really struggle, especially if they're coming from a background in a country that has a national curriculum that doesn't require them to do those kinds of assessments and essays and that level of research that the IB demands. Plus, we have students who we've worked with from refugee camps. I was in a TOK, a theory of knowledge class once upon a time, where a girl who came from the at that point, newly formed South Sudan, she was writing about hearing bullets flying outside of her tent. And now she's in Armenia in a class sharing this very personal story. And it was one of those pin drop silence moments where it's like, whoa. And I felt very unprepared also. How do I deal with that? And how do I talk about this? But at the same time, figured out ways to talk about it.
And for those students who went into theater program to Jason, it really helped to overcome such differences in cultural background. And we constantly discuss this. It was everyday discussion how people can communicate with each other, what they need. Like, they all need theater. Everyone needs to take theater class, but you cannot make everyone to take theater class, right? For for their well-being. So well-being. So we also were teaching some workshops and master classes here at the University of Cinematography in Yerevan. We were invited there. Then we participated in the international festival. So then we went to Moscow and started intensive course on Meisner technique.
Back up a little bit. At the international festival, that idea, that new idea about what I could do with Meisner technique, that ended up being transformed, and then through the two of us talking of it.
Technique class.
One of our first original ideas in terms of a training program, which would basically a trust building exercise
and using
our senses and taking away elements of our senses. We called it the experiment See, Act, Share. There's more information available on jasonlasky.com if you want to check that out. But it was the first time that we had some, new ideas and new approaches to how do we get people to really communicate with each other in a way that isn't just speaking. And how can we develop a real sense of trust in a short amount of time with a stranger? And what are the applications for this?
Because we took our international students, to the Yerevan University, and that was two different, absolutely groups of people.
Plus,
and they even remember how they were standing up. They stand up like two lines, like opposite of each other. And in the end of the exercise,
they're all together.
They are sitting pairs like this, taking selfies and writing each other's phone numbers. And I'm like, that works. Because if you need to make a performance fast, or you need to build something fast, you need people to communicate and trust each other,
get together.
And that's that we kept developing this. And then we went on Meisner intensive, which we then broke into 3 levels. And the 3rd level, which we did this spring, turned out into absolutely already not Meisner training, but it was already Lasky training, because we mostly gave our unique ideas and technique. And that's how and the last drop was when Jason fell.
The last drop.
The last drop, we can call it.
Was when Jason dropped. So February, this past February, we came back from our latest installment of our delivery of the Meisner, our version of Meisner training in Moscow with all the actors. At this point, with that cohort, we had trained something like 160, 170 actors just at that with that one particular producer in Moscow. Over the course of all these, 15, 16 years at this point, we've worked with over 1,000 students in different cultures, in different programs. And I mean, even going back to when I first started teaching English in 2006, because my way and my approach was the thing, every teacher has their particular way, and we are all the sum of our experiences and the sum of our knowledge and the sum of our interactions with those who are around us. So I was always taking that part of my Spanish teacher from high school, and this part of, this element of Elizabeth Kemp or Susan Aston, this part of Anne Brady from Binghamton University. Hi, Anne.
Oh, yeah, Jason also went through another master's while all this was happening.
And I was going through
playwright.
And I also thank you to Paul Collins, God rest his soul. He passed away, and he reignited my writing spirit. And thanks to him, and writing what I called something like his eulogy, I suppose. It was a 2-person play that takes place in limbo between me and him, and it was read. I wasn't there, but I saw the recording. He passed away in 2018 from a quick bout with cancer. He found out a week. He packed up his stuff, went to England. A week later, he was gone, and he was such a major pillar, I'd say, of the expat theater community in Shanghai, that of course there had to be a memorial. And when my good friend Fiona Pollard, hey Fiona, told us about it, immediately I just set to writing. So thanks to Paul, I was, something came up with me again in terms of writing, and then it was like, all right, let me go finish my master's now. So I did another master's program, a low residency master's with the New Hampshire Institute of Art, which has now unfortunately disappeared. But I received some amazing training over the year that I was there, from 2018 to 2019. So going back to Lasky well-being, we
came back from Moscow training.
We came back from the Moscow training this past February.
Extremely inspired by all the feedback which we constantly receive from our students, and it mostly is about their life-changing, life-changing continuation of our classes.
Yeah.
So what they use for acting, for stage, for the scene is usually, yay, we are better actors, but it's always we
insisted at some point, on like the second or third time that we were working with this group, that we insisted, like, take what you're doing and bring it off stage. It's more important for you to practice this stuff with your spouse, with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend, with the cashier, with the guy or the lady who, or him there who's driving the bus. Do that work. That work is going to inform you in such a greater way, and then it's going to be easier when you have to turn it on, for acting out your fiction on stage or in front of the camera. That was the thing that, again, was a big idea. Another big idea came from how one of our actors was, she was Stanislavski trained. She's a well-known theater, and Svetlana has a film background as well, right?
Theater, yeah.
She's a well-known actress for like 20, 30 years. And we asked her to do an exercise as part of the Meisner repetition, and you build towards doing an activity, and there's a sense of urgency about the activity and a certain amount of personalization about the activity. Like, why am I doing this right now? And we let the actor decide what their reason is, and if it's about a person. And I always kind of, push people to say, well, make it about a person, because you're going to have the strongest connection with the person. Even if it's an object, well, the object came from somewhere. It was given to you. It's going to be the person. Somebody, the smell of the fragrance, it's going to remind you of a person. I always go back to the people. So she started working, and she was following the exercise. She ended up becoming very emotional about it, and everybody started clapping their hands at the end, because when time is out and the activity is over and you've essentially failed in that activity, you're left with that sense of, well, I didn't get what I wanted, and maybe I've let somebody down. I asked her very pointed questions, and I already kind of knew the answers because I was sitting just an arm's length away from her with the students watching. And I said, you were thinking about somebody very big. Sveta translates, and she has those eyes that tell me, the kind of eyes that you would love to capture for the camera, for that real rawness. And I said, who are you thinking about? And she told me who she was thinking about. And I said, and where is that person now? Already knowing that person doesn't exist anymore. And she said the person passed away. And then she added, it's the anniversary of that person's passing, and a bunch of family is actually coming at the end of this week to celebrate that. And I said, all right. And the rest of the class, they were stunned by how they weren't stunned by the fact that she was using a dead person in her life. They were stunned.
It was a mother.
It was her mom. I was trying to keep that information hidden, whatever.
Okay.
But she was using her mom. And I said, was that easy for you to do? And she said, no. And I said, all right, let's have a little chat about self-care. And her doing that, her using her mom in that exercise triggered something that I remember Susan Aston, the great, wonderful Susan Aston, said, if you're going to be working with somebody who has passed away, you have to give yourself enough time. Susan, I remember, said 7 years to allow yourself to process that grief so that you're actually comfortable working with that person who's no longer here because of, just the weight of that.
Because of self-care.
Because of self-care. And other ideas from self-care were talked about by Jacqueline Knapp, another great acting teacher who's at Actor Studio Drama School, who once ran a workshop, a 1 or 2 day workshop about self-care. But this was the first time that I stepped up and I said, all right, you don't ever work with your mom again. And it's not for me to tell her when her grief has been fully processed. Maybe it's 7 years, maybe it's 20 years, maybe it's never. So that began a talk that then became a requirement for me and Sveta to deliver to all of our students in Russia, saying, you can't work with stuff that you aren't able to walk away from.
Because most of the students are trained with Stanislavski technique, and they try to, Russian student is a very hardworking student and an actor.
Diligent, hardworking, wonderful, creative, imaginative.
They can break the wall,
follow it to the letter, essentially.
Yeah.
And but they all were carrying some very, very heavy shit, with them on the stage and off the stage. And they were traumatizing themselves, and their directors are traumatizing and still have been traumatizing them with crazy images, making them watch some crazy stuff before the, shoot. And that's unhealthy.
Go watch this documentary about how people are burning to death, and then now think about your spouse, think about your boyfriend for this upcoming scene. And we just kept saying no.
So the topic was self-care topic for actors mostly, and it was very strong. And then we realized that why we talk about it, because Meisner technique, and if we combine it with everything else, because during the course we add Linklater voice progression, we add some movement series, we add some relaxation things, it all helps you to be present in the moment for the play, for the stage, for the scene, but also in life, to be present in the moment when you talk to your partner, when you are with yourself even. And it was the feedback kept, as I said before, kept coming. Like, I was on the edge of divorce, but we didn't divorce, thanks to 3 or 4 days with you guys. And then something in this way, there was some couple students with some suicidal thoughts or something, and all of the feedback we were receiving was so strong and very often about life, how they apply it in life.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point we looked at each other when we came back from the last February thing, and we realized that we working for the acting industry, we are working just for humans. Doesn't matter, because we tried it with businessmen. With we chose some top management, friends,
C-suite executives,
and we invited them for the course, and it worked with them as well. So we realized it's not only for actors. So we came back, and Jason had in March.
So I had
the fall.
I fell from a height of about.
So essentially, the Lasky wellbeing approach is an approach that's stemmed from acting teaching that can be applied to acting, but generally it's an approach that you can apply to any career or anything. So is it then
people are people, and they have
now it's being and now a note from our sponsor. The Theatre Art Life podcast is proud to be sponsored by ClearCom. ClearCom is the leader in voice communications for theatre and the performing arts. Call your cues with the simplicity and elegance of ClearCom Intercom solutions. You can find them at clearcom.com. Go check them out. Yeah, so it's now being formulated into how do people get the Lasky wellbeing approach? Is it through a course? Is it through online? Is it in person with you guys?
So we have just
all of the above.
All of the above. Yeah. We had our first trial cohort with 8 participants in the end of April, beginning of May of this year. And again, the feedback has been consistent with the feedback we've received before. And the main question we ask is, what has stayed with you? What has impacted you the most from our training? And the responses vary. Like somebody says, our investigation into, because we have a very pointed and very focused investigation into developing people's a greater depth of their sensory intake and their sensory development, because if people are taking the time to, for example, cliche, stop and smell the roses, but also really look at the rose and really touch the rose and really appreciate, and even take off a little rose petal, and
have an impact. It will affect them.
It has an impact if people take the time to examine their senses, because that's what we are. We're sensory creatures, and our brains are processing things, and we have these feelings that are connected, whether chemically or something higher realm than that, but we have these connections to these different experiences that are going to make us feel a certain way. And if we aren't in a position, or if people are not in a position to be able to specifically name their feeling, then that's also part of our jobs in terms of the well-being approach, creating a sense of emotional literacy, and a way to articulate those things out loud. We find so often people struggle with being able to say how they feel, and in a way that goes beyond the surface. We were working with one student. Sveta said to him, "How do you feel?" And he said, "Well, I feel the wind coming in through the window." Okay, how do you feel? And it took several times of asking that question before he finally came to an emotion he was comfortable speaking about. So when we want,
during the course, and this it is intensive. We have it as intensive 5-day. We have it as 10-day, and
40 days.
The best to do is 40 days, because the 40 days is the person who needs to form new habits, so to form the new neural connections, and we just awaken and wake up the senses, and we connect the physical senses and emotional senses, and because feelings are feelings, and people sometimes think that feelings it's only what I feel inside, but our physicality and emotions, mentality is connected.
Yeah.
And we started and finally named it as Lasky Wellbeing Technique. We also call it a new normal. Our students called it neo-normal.
Neo-normal technique.
Because they say every moment is a new normal for you. You need to adjust to the new chaos, how to live through the chaos, how to stop yourself and to be with the chaos, to be with yourself, connected with yourself, while being connected with your partner, for example, your partner in the moment, right? And we still working on writing the whole course. We are very close to finishing the book, and it happened so fast. From Jason fall and broke his spine in the end of March, and we were at our lowest in terms of physicality. He was laying down, and it was terrible. And I was emotionally affected. He was emotionally and physically affected, and
you were physically affected.
I was
too.
affected physically from my emotions as well. I was itching till bruises. My legs were covered in huge bruises from just itching myself from the stress. And we used this technique firstly for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We just saved ourselves because that was the lowest moment, and we couldn't even. I think my next step, if not to do this technique together or by myself and then with Jason, I would end up like at the hospital, because my stress level from his fall, and like we were sure that the spine is broken, but we didn't know at which
to
point.
what extent and what the long-term effects would be. Thankfully, there haven't been any major effects
so he
as
walks
of right
now.
Like,
And
I'm
okay.
okay.
You're sitting up quite confidently right now in front of me, so I'm
walking,
glad to
doing
see
stuff,
this.
and it was so lucky.
I was gardening. I was
fell.
gardening and using a pickaxe, the last week or so. Like I look at that fall as it really is a blessing, I can say, for everything that's come out since the accident, since my fall, since my lack of awareness of my surroundings and not seeing what was there and where the danger was.
But the floor was there.
The floor was there,
yes,
but
our
the
workers
floor
didn't fix the floor.
Yeah.
So he stepped on the actual floor, but he fell through the floor.
I fell through the floor 2.4 meters onto hard, fresh concrete. But I can say that everything that we're working on now, the why that we're doing it, the why is because we really we care about other people, and we want them to care more about themselves. And a footnote to that work with the actress, she found a better way and an easier way to work, because she told us this when she saw us I think like 6 months later in the next intensive. She wasn't a student. She just came by to say hi, and she said, I have to talk to you.
I have to tell you something urgent.
I have to tell you something urgent. Like,
I stopped carrying the bag. I'm so free. I'm so happy now. I go to work and then I go back home and I'm happy.
I
don't carry the bag of stuff with me. And she even looked like that. And she came to this Lasky Wellbeing intensive to Armenia recently. When we had to hurry up because of the May holidays, so students have time to come. And
her feedback again was consistent, where
absolutely.
She's just she's not a young lady. She's in her 40s or so, and she's like new lease on life kind of idea, and a new approach to living. And we like to say that we helped her find that. That's what the Lasky Wellbeing approach is.
The idea is
helping people build new habits or find better ways of doing things that are going to be beneficial to their own instrument and to all the instruments around them as well. And you wanted to say?
I wanted to say that now we want to just bring it to the world, to international schools, to businesses, to just
corporate culture,
to families in light of, because I usually work with refugees here a lot, and now there are lots of Russians coming in and they're relocating and they finding new homes. And
they're also traumatized because of world events.
Because they find in new homes, not because they want it. So how to adjust to the new culture? How to adjust your children and your family to the going somewhere new and living there? Because sometimes you don't choose where you're going, and you don't choose that you have to leave your country or your home.
Yeah, it's very interesting that for me, that's very interesting that this is born from not only your careers but your personal experience, because I think the best teachers have lived and let those lessons themselves, right? So that's it. And then secondly, what's attractive to me, honestly, is your cross-cultural work globally feeds into this. And I don't know the course, but a lot of the times when I think about some of these self-help stuff, it comes from a very particular source, like America or these things, that doesn't necessarily have the nuances or the empathy of social, cultural, societal structures or experience, right?
Exactly.
So for me, as an Australian person, I will read some of those things that might come out of America. There's no sense of identification on that as a method because it's very culturally centered around something. But I would imagine, given your global crazy, eclectic life, that it would be interesting to see a manifestation of a well-being approach that is born from that experience. So, yeah.
And plus,
I'm very interested to see more.
Plus the post-COVID and COVID years, and now post-COVID world, it shows people need well-being so much.
Yeah.
People struggle so much.
Yes.
And there are so many conflicts happening just from people not knowing the emotions and not knowing how to communicate through that.
Yeah.
And luckily,
and not just the pandemic though, but it's also the foray into technology and people being on their phones more, and
absolutely.
through consumption of media, and the loss of family gatherings and the loss of community things, the downgrade, whether people like church or whatever. Church provided society and community, and now people are less inclined to sit with a religion, but then there's nothing on the other side. Like, there's so many constructs around the world that are shifting.
Yeah.
And the pandemic accelerated that, right? Some isolation
and all the wars
and loneliness and all that. Yeah. So it's so much needed, and I hope that we all realize that. Because I definitely, it's something that you take care of in your own family, but also the people around you. Yeah. But I do see it like you guys. There's a lot of people that have more stress and pain in their life than you should want to as a human being, right?
Yeah. And with not only COVID, but the craziest idea that I read when certain conflicts began in the last year or year and a half, it's when people started re-examining the idea of, well, these people are not from that part of the world. Can we classify them as refugees? Like, yeah, you can. People having to leave their home under any circumstances. I look at the new, the relocants, the relocant Russians who are here from the IT sector, who have been pouring in.
Not even IT sector. There are not. Some of them are just from no IT sector.
Sure,
they're just families. And they fled Russia because they don't want to go fight in Ukraine.
Right. So, like, conscientious objectors to the war
here to Dilijan, for example,
where they are refugees.
Huge new community. They opened even 2 Russian schools right now within the year in only a small town.
Yeah,
Dilijan, because they have.
But even the terminology is off, because technically you could say I'm an immigrant to Hong Kong,
right?
But I'm called an expat,
right?
Why am I called an expat and somebody else is called an immigrant?
Exactly.
That's
the same. We talk about it now.
And the refugees.
And it's circumstantial.
It is the same. I cannot call these Russians relocants, because relocations is when the company makes the move, and then you decide, they opened in London, I'd like to go to London. No, it didn't happen like this.
No.
And it's not expatriates, and it is refugees. It is very just hurtful and painful to call it, but they found a refuge. How you say refuge?
Refuge.
Refuge. Yeah, refuge.
Which is a new home where they can have safe, more or less for now, for this time. Maybe next month it will not be like this.
Yeah.
A safe place where they have to adjust, pay huge money. They left their homes, their grandparents.
Yeah.
For full year, they haven't seen their grandparents. And some of them, like I have a friend right now here, and her mother has cancer, stage 4, and she cannot go there with her husband.
Yeah.
Because if she goes, he will be sent to the army. This is refugees.
It's madness.
And this is totally hard, because we see the kids, and our house became for many years already the place for people from such situations coming to this place. Like Jason said, I worked before with Artsakh refugees. I don't know if you mentioned. I had 2,400 refugees, and I went from home to home every single day for 7 months. And I met families where...
This is when Azerbaijan was attacking Nagorno-Karabakh in the 44-day war in 2020.
I personally met every day so many eyes of children and parents and grandparents without their men, because they couldn't come here with men, so it was all women or old men.
Yeah.
And then some of them received the news that they don't have a son or father or brother anymore. So I went to the funerals with them, and I had to go and comfort them. And from this experience, also now, as soon as that war stopped, then another war started, and then my people started coming, and I started welcoming them in Dilijan in our house. And they first months they just hang out around our house because we gave them something what they really needed, some place where we are not talking about politics. We just talk about how are you doing, like the fireplace, and we sit around and kids are playing.
And it's very hard for them
because they are taken with their roots like this, and then they just stamped in somewhere where they and also with Russian passport you cannot go far away, because there are visa requirements, and they cannot now go to many places because visa, they cancel visas right now, or permanent residency, like Turkey, for example. So people just sit on a car and drive somewhere new, like in a car with all your shit. You are refugees, people, and you need to adjust to this new change and to this new culture, which is absolutely new. And your kids have to adjust with the new life without grandparents around, or their friends, or their school, where everything is settled. So we were not settled for so many years. We know how it feels. We gave birth to 3 kids in each different country, and my pregnancy went through 3 countries and 3 languages, English, Russian, and Chinese. So when you go to one gynecologist to another one, he's like, what the hell is that? It's characters. Like, oh yeah, because I started it in China, and then New York, and
that's
then
my history.
Like we have each of our kids has like 3 vaccinations cards in 3 different, all different countries. So we always need to adjust.
I feel you. I can't keep track of all of my visas and passports and vaccinations and tax returns.
Yeah, all that.
Paperwork.
It's all those fucking papers. Stacks. When you live in one country, you don't do this. You like live in one country, you have one passport, one this. Like we don't.
One mortgage, right?
We have so many passports, so many translations, notarized translation, and more than notarized, and then apostille translations, and then we study abroad, and then we have these diplomas we need to translate. It's all chaos, and it's all hard, and it's all stress. But people don't want to talk. They're like, oh, I live in a new country, and then all the stress is packed. But you have to admit that it is stressful when you live not in your community, not with the, when you can go from relative to relative during Thanksgiving. If there is no even Thanksgiving in the country where you moved, or no, like we constantly celebrate for all these years all different holidays to adjust to a new place, and then remember the Chinese New Year, and then remember this, and this all was together build up into this. When we work, we always bring up to our students our example. We always use ourselves as example, because we can always use us, because there is always a story related to anything.
I mean, we are very much risk takers. I can say this is the big thing. We've had we've had the privilege in certain circumstances, in certain regards, to be able to move from here to here to here of our own accord. But sometimes, like in the case of Nairobi, for example, we showed up, and at the end of the first day of orientation, they said, you need to go back. Like,
or in Shanghai, we came to Shanghai,
and they
Jason
said,
was fired one day before he had to start the class.
The afternoon before I was going to start
and I'm there with a new baby. We took money to rent apartment. We rented, we decorated it. And then he comes home and like, I'm fired.
I got fired.
What? Like, how
and
do you survive? We just came.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That shit happens. And if it happens in your own country, you still at home, you still have your family around. You still have comfort, someone who can help you to comfort.
But there's no safety net when you're out and about. And so then you have...
That's right.
You have to build it, and then you need to rely on yourself and on each other. And then we can provide the tools, and we can provide the special exercise and breathing activities and acting activities, which
it won't
help.
And it can't change the chaos, but it just allows people to process it in a way that's not going to be damaging to themselves or damaging to the people around them, because it's very easy to get angry and to have violent reactions when little things happen.
And then abuse happens. And very often it happens from people who are not even aware of it, or they don't know how to react to it, because that's how their emotions and that's how their connections are built. And then they don't even know. And then when we start working with students, there are lots of always and tears and laughter during our classes.
Yeah.
And this is always honest laughter and tears. And then some of them just during the course realize how much abuse they have been dealing with, and work abuse and family abuse
and like generational abuse and cycles of abuse
because of how people deal with their emotions and how they don't know what they feel.
Yeah, and it's also very important to say everything that we are trying to deliver to other students are things that we have lived through individually and collectively. Me with her, me with my kids, her with me, Sveta with our kids. It's all things that we've come to realize in a very pointed way, especially since my accident. It's lots of things that came up that we hadn't been talking about or we hadn't realized. I certainly hadn't realized in terms of my blindness of, falling through, the wall, falling through the floor because I wasn't paying attention. Lots of other things I hadn't been paying attention to. And so our work, back to the why, I don't want people to live that way. And she doesn't want people to live.
And we are changing. We are going
on.
through the huge change for the last 2 months. We are going through opening up how much abuse is happening in our family. It's not those families who have abuse, like emotional abuse. When you come home tired and
everywhere,
you can abuse your child. It happens.
Yeah.
And then you feel shitty for that. But we are trying to explain to people during the technique that it is not staying forever.
Yeah.
The next moment is the next new moment. Yeah. So change can happen in the next second even.
Yeah.
And that helps. And it actually helps. So the feedback so far is great, and we hope to make a world a better place. And maybe one day when we are not even existing on this planet, there will not be war because they're using Lasky well-being. That's the idea.
Amazing. Well, we've completely run out of time, but I've really enjoyed this moment with you guys. Before we finish, though, how do people find about the Lasky wellbeing approach? Where do they find you?
Right. So it's not operating yet, but there is a website, www.laskywellbeing.com. And to get in touch, there's also, we are in the process of building a dedicated LinkedIn page, as well as Instagram and TikTok.
Literally this or next week, it's all coming.
Okay.
Yeah, in the next.
So follow the website until now, and is there a newsletter or something you can sign up to? Or?
That hasn't been published yet, but it is being worked on. And in terms of information for right now, in terms of contact, there's Jason, Jason, at laskywellbeing.com. There's Svetlana, Svetlana, at laskywellbeing.com. We have the existing websites, jasonlasky.com, also for information about our theater work and theater life. There's also, we didn't talk at all about the studio or my voiceover stuff. That's okay. But we're going through a rebranding and reorganizing of that as well. We're calling that honeytoyourears.com. Those individual words, that's where you can find voiceover projects. In terms of the writing, audiobook production, podcast ideation, and full-on production, video game characters, e-learning, all the voiceover, element of our life. Those are the main sources. Then you can find us both on LinkedIn if you just search for our names, and on Facebook. We're easily found.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Svetlana and Jason, for joining us on the Theatre Art Life podcast.
Thank you for
it's
having
been a pleasure
us,
to meet you.
Thank you.